This is a film about corrosion protection of classic 911s. I packed about 700 hours into my Carrera this winter, and now it's back on the road, used almost daily, so we have to talk about corrosion. In '76, Porsche started using galvanized panels for the most tricky spots of their cars. In the 924-944 series that were produced by Audi, both companies were gaining experiences with it, and by the mid-80s Audi revealed the first fully galvanized body with the B3. Porsche kept updating the 911 till from '86 on the cars were almost completely made of double-sided galvanized panels. Does it mean late G models won't rust? No. A zinc layer protects the steel below by sacrificing itself in terms of donating its electrons to the oxygen. Once all electrons are gone, protection is coming to an end. If we take 35-year-old 911s, it's very likely that at places where it is important, the zinc will already be gone. As a rule of thumb, a fully galvanized body extends lifespan by a factor of 1.5. And if a Porsche once was built for 10 years, it would now keep for 15 years. In my case, that was 19 years ago. You gotta do something, really. You heard me ranting enough about grease stuff on external surfaces. If you wish to follow that route, you gotta know it's a one-way ticket. Once the stuff is on, soon the car inevitably is going to be covered in a disgusting crust of greasy dirt. Undoubtedly, however, a reasonably thin film of oil and grease does the job. In cavities. Actually, even in cavities, it's without alternative. The design of the 911's door sill B-pillar section. It consists of a three-part sill plus an additional boomerang or banana-shaped panel named kidney bowl to reinforce the whole section. They found it a clever idea to also install the square tube of the jack at the place where pretty much all these panels meet. This makes me think that German designers back in the 50s still thought along the lines of the lifespan of their designs of the 40s, which was 2 weeks in average. Now, what sort of product do I suggest to take? You see, I'm not very much interested in how well it attaches. As I'm not using it externally, it simply doesn't matter, and therefore most of the according comparison tests in magazines I find quite pointless. I even find it an advantage to be able to remove it again without huge effort, because you can't weld a greased panel properly. I find it a good idea if it becomes more thinly at, say, 35 degrees, because that means that it will run back into the gaps if you put the car in the sun in the summer. I want it to be harmless, because inevitably it will distribute over the workshop, and most importantly, it needs to be available in different viscosities, as we shall see in a minute. One range of product that covers all these needs is fluid film, and that's why I use it. Let's take a closer look at this. These panels represent a plain schematic model of a 911 door sill like they built it from '63 to '89. Yes, in reality not all three panels meet in one point but are shifted, but I'm sure you can see where this is going. With the pressure cup gun, It's easy to cover the surface with grease of medium viscosity of the kind melted butter. It will stick to the surfaces but also cover the gaps. And here is how contemporary Alfa Romeos are built. A minimum of 2 panels horizontally join a flange on the inner sill, building a horribly tight gap, the perfect place for capillary water to create rust. It goes up to 4 gaps of that kind at the spots where fender and A and B pillar join. It could only go wrong. So if you own a 105 Alpha, please draw your own conclusions from this little experiment. I can tell you what mine are. I will in the future use fluid film liquid A first, viscosity roughly like olive oil, and fluid film NAS as a second go. Liquid A to penetrate all the crevices and NAS to cover the surfaces. And I will softly knock at the outer sill with the rubber hammer to help it find its way. Does that mean no liquid A needed for Porsches? Wait a second. The one spot that buried countless 911s, the 911 killer if you will, is the area around the checking tube. When I had eventually cleaned up the left side of my car, what I found didn't please me at all. Some guy had done some welding exercises, used plastic material of unknown origin to seal it, and covered it all up with an abundance of grease stuff. Now, making these films, I find it very difficult to do all the filming work and at the same time meet restoration challenges that put me outside my comfort zone. That said, fixing the problems that you can see here, I deliberately left the camera off because I was far outside my comfort zone. But nevertheless, some useful footage was created while I exchanged thoughts with my friends. And though these snippets don't meet my usual quality standards, I find them useful enough to share them with you. I cut open the rear fender and kidney bowl, made repair panels and butt welded them in. I partly replaced the reinforcement plate of the checking point, created new stone guard and rust protection, and did a blend paint job. Good Lord. Now back to the cavities around the checking point. The inner one, which results from the space enclosed by the inner and middle sill, and which houses the heating tubes. At the 3.2 it can be accessed by a number of holes provided by Porsche. About 30 centimeters left and right of the checking point. I recommend to do this with about 6 bar, a 0.4 nozzle and fluid film liquid A, followed by another go with fluid film NAS. Same pressure, same nozzle. Outside that hotspot, 3 bar and fluid film NAS will do the job. I can't tell exactly when Porsche introduced these maintenance holes. Some of them, for instance, don't exist in my 76 Targa. You know, they continuously optimized the design during its epic time of production. If your F or G model doesn't have them, as you can see them in my film, I do recommend to get yourselves under a late 3.2, find out where they are and add them to your car. Moving on to the next cavity, which is the one between middle sill and outer sill. Let me say a word about the openings above the jack tube. As you can see, they are sealed at my car, and that is not original. I'm torn between finding this a good measure because it does keep humidity out, and the concern that humidity could be trapped. At my other 911, I left them open. At this one, I looked inside with the endoscope and I found that everything was already nicely covered with some product that was brought in by the pre-owner, so I decided to leave it as it is. In any case, if you have just 1 hour and you want to add some quick rust protection to your 911, bringing in some liquid A into this area will be a great service to it. These lateral holes that I'm using here, as much as I know, they were added at some time in the late 70s. If you don't have them, the door strips must go off and you'll find others. I used both as I wanted to make sure that fluid film really goes everywhere. I guess you would agree that the cavity inside the kidney bowls, which is connected to the checking point area, needs some fluid film, and yes, it can be accessed by a hole from inside the car. But removing all the interior parts to get there, including this factory fresh insulation, it just didn't smile at me. I therefore drilled holes into the kidney bowls, which will allow me to easily maintain this area in the future. Moving on to the cavities in the front of the car. Some of you may remember when this series of films started with the repair of the rusted through panel under the front fender. Grinding the seams down makes it look like nothing ever happened, but the flip side reveals the truth. There's not much one can do about the backside of the seam remaining visible, but at least I wanted to cover it with some anti-rust primer. Admittedly, this repair won't win a beauty contest, but I'm not aware about any better method, and apart from a lack of aesthetics, it will certainly endure many years to come. Let's take a quick look at the gear I'm using, because I know you'd ask me anyway. This is a VP pressure cup gun. It's a German brand that specializes on these very products since 1967. Yes, there are cheaper products, and yes, delivery periods at VP these days are a bit high. But don't buy anything else. Don't forget you have a high pressure container filled with grease somewhere close to your head, so a quality product is what you want. The seals of this gun will endure all kinds of materials for many years or even decades. The quality of the tube is an optimum compromise between flexibility and stiffness to really go deeply into the cavities of the car. They have different nozzles and hook nozzles, tubes and whatnot. As always, I've set up a collaboration with Matupa, and you can buy a set of gun plus fluid film in the right amounts for 911 or Alpha 105 for about 167 euros, link in the description. These panels represent the car's front frame, and they form a cavity going around the tank 360 degrees. Some say it's one of the nastiest sources of rust of the 911. If you want to be extra careful, you can start with liquid A and add some NAS on top of it. I went for NAS only. The access point of the left side is a bit more difficult to find and reach, but not really. Leaking batteries sometimes destroy this part of the car, and I really hope that doesn't happen to you. But even then it makes sense to protect this area, as it also is a low spot of the entire boot, and most of the water going into it will at some point end up here, invisibly. The angled nozzle is the right way to deal with it. Make sure you cover 360 degrees.